From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
The news that Hasbro may cast aside its longtime home of Pawtucket for a new location, possibly in Greater Boston, caused panic among state and local officials. What is being done to keep the iconic toy maker in the Ocean State, or is it too late? Our guest on the first half of Newsmakers, Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebien. Then, with just a month left before Election Day, we get expert analysis on the state of the presidential race from one of the country's preeminent political reporters, Jonathan Martin. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi, and we welcome our guest, Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebien. Mayor, it's good to have you back in the program.
Great to be here. I appreciate both of you for giving me this opportunity. So,
no shock here. We're going to start with Hasbro, and I want to cut to the chase on this one, right? Look, there's been a lot of criticism about how this was handled, or I guess more importantly, not handled. Just the other day, your opponent in November, independent Nathan Luciano, said, quote, "Why have we gotten to this point that there has to be a threat of leaving for the mayor to do something about this and to try to keep Hasbro here instead of doing these things all along?" I'll just ask it to your opponent's point. Did someone drop the ball?
No, listen, and that's the ineffectiveness or the unexpectation that he has of not being in the office, right? We've been meeting with Hasbro regularly prior to this. There was no indication whatsoever.
Let's be clear. You met with CEO Cox prior to the news?
No. So the commerce teams have a meeting and met with Hasbro's team as recently as February, just to put in a time perspective.
State commerce.
State commerce, and updating our commerce and us as well. So they met, and there was no indication at that time that they were looking to leave, being totally honest. So, of course, then we all get caught by surprise, right? It's not where we want to be. We've been in touch with Chris Cox since then, and trying before, and we finally met yesterday, as a matter of fact, face to face.
How did that meeting go?
Very good. I got to be careful when I say this. I know everybody wants to know everything. One of the commitments that we made to him and his team, after they made us a commitment that Pawtucket is on the map, we'll definitely consider staying in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and we're working very closely with the governor's team, the speaker, and the Senate president's team. Having said that, though, right, we've got to put a package together. It really is about what their needs are, what their wants are. And quite honestly, one thing we recognized together is, as much as that building is home, that building is no longer suitable or meets their expectation, right? They're downsizing to some degree. So as much as I love my community, they're going to be out of there, and it's our job now to keep them in Pawtucket. So just going back to the quick comment, we've been talking about it. They came in, they apologized. Nobody should have handled it this way. But we've been out there talking to them. They just kept it very close to the vest.
So to be clear, Chris Cox told you where they are right now. So they're not going to stay there no matter what. It might be stay in Pawtucket, might be stay in Rhode Island, might be Boston, but they're not staying where they are.
They didn't say it that direct, but they have major concerns about the investment or the lack of investment in that building over the years. And they have a whole different model than that building. Let's be honest, right? They're licensing, they're e-gaming, they're movies, right? They're all of the dynamics, and that building is not conducive to maker spaces to bring that in there. So it would be a major renovation to stay there. So, yes.
I just one more on that, Mayor. And look, I know you said the Commerce Department met with lower-ranking people at Hasbro and the executive team in February, but all through the years when Governor Raimondo was governor, and you and her both talked about it, she was talking to Brian Goldner, the former CEO. He was talking about them potentially leaving. It just seems like it should have been more of a concern to the governor and to you, frankly, that they were still a flight risk, since we knew they had been before COVID. No one had ever indicated they weren't thinking about a new headquarters anymore.
So quickly, I hear that's a fair point, but the reality is, back in 19, when we were doing the pitch collectively with Governor Raimondo at the time, Commerce Director Stefan Pryor, we had put some things on the table back then, which was enough to say for Brian, the former CEO, to say, listen, we've got to look at, this is competitive. We'd like to stay. We're from Pawtucket, from Rhode Island, our history. Let's look at this. Then COVID hits. The leadership changes. Governor Raimondo is now a commerce director. We have a new governor, and we have a new president with Chris Cox. So we have done outreach, built some relationship, but never to the relationship where they were comfortable enough to share what their real perspective was. Or they were still building it as we're learning. And that's part of the challenge right now. So they're trying to figure out where they want to be and what makes sense for them.
Final question on this topic before we go to Ted. What's your percentage Where does the percentage stand that Hasbro stays in Pawtucket right now?
I've been saying this, right? Based on prior to yesterday, I feel a lot better today having the conversation, getting those honest conversation and dialogue going and trying to understand that. Prior to this, I looked at this as the Hail Mary, right? But Pawtucket has a lot of great things to offer. We've got the waterfront, the rail, the commuter rail, the highway access, the active zone coming with the Tidewater Stadium. So we're in a different place than we were in 19 for a lot of the things they were looking at because it wasn't a reality. Now it's coming.
50%?
I would say I'm comfortable saying 50%. I feel very strongly that we have not been shut out. Chris, to his credit, and his team were honest in saying we're not shutting it out. But at the end of the day, it really comes out understanding their needs and trying to build that around that. And we think we can on a lot of the sites we have.
I'm going to ask you about a political thing that just happened. State Senator Sandra Cano announced just 2 days after she won renomination unopposed that she was resigning to take a new federal job, which had been in the works for some period of time. You and your allies immediately installed your campaign manager, Lori Urso, who'd worked for Cano's fiance, James Diosa, as the new Democratic Senate nominee. Mayor, again, people see that as sort of a rigging of the game, you know, and people don't like that. How do you defend that kind of insider, quick swapping out of a nominee where the voters didn't even know what was going on?
So, in fairness, right, I get it. Absolutely fair perception. But when you look at the reality, number one, even to this day, right, Sandra Cano knows the position she's going to, cannot talk about it because of the federal position. We can all make some assumptions, and the media is not far off. Having said all of that, she is obligated based on the Hatch Act as an employee coming in. So there are rules and regulations. I can tell you, and I'm sure the story at the time will come out, just that nobody aligned it this way. It was out of everybody's control. It was until the government, federal government, supplied her with an indication or a job offer. I can tell you that job offer came in on that Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day it was.
Right after the primary. You swear that you didn't all know this was definitely happening?
No. Did we know it could happen? Absolutely. But what everybody wanted to do is have it happen before June, so there was none of this bullshit. Sorry. Oh. Sorry, BS, right? Sorry, right? And do you want me to stop?
No, it's okay.
Okay, no, sorry.
We'll bleep it out later.
BS, right? But saying so that because we knew what it looked like, right? We're smart enough to understand that, but we didn't control it. It was really on the federal government and their rules and regulations on how they do it.
No one will ever accuse you of not being authentic. I want to play something for you. I covered the visit of U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland to Providence this week, his first official trip to Rhode Island. And it did not go unnoticed that Garland talked about your city. Take a listen.
Okay.
Just recently, the latter included the department's efforts to monitor compliance with federal voting rights laws in Pawtucket. Last month, thanks to the work of this office and the Civil Rights Division, we announced that federal observers would be assigned to monitor the September 10th primary in Pawtucket for compliance with the Voting Rights Act.
So the backdrop here, Mayor, as you know, the Fed sued Pawtucket. The short of it is the Fed's accused your city and voting officials there of not doing enough for Spanish-speaking voters. I am sure you would rather not have had Merrick Garland in his only visit so far to Rhode Island talk about Pawtucket. Am I right?
Great. So facts are, right, the DOJ referenced the issues that the Board of Canvassers, the local Board of Canvassers, which, yes, it falls under Pawtucket, but there is a separation between the administration and the responsibilities there. We were made aware of it back, I don't want to lie to you guys, but I'm going to say back February-ish. We immediately brought in attorneys when it was brought to our attention. We then became partners with the Board of Canvassers to try to flush out what made sense. As the mayor, I'm very disheartened by what happened. They're minor in some cases, and I don't want to make it, but there's no reason that we should have been in that position. We have a very diverse community, right? It's just some common sense and practices. I think that the Board of Canvassers, I'm going to say fell asleep a little bit, but in their mind were doing the right things, but not enough. It was no surprise that the DOJ has been in Pawtucket, Providence, West Warwick, and Woonsocket the last several years on the federal. And so we came to what we felt was there was no reason to fight it, right? It's an embarrassment on everybody. We should have never been there. So we accepted the responsibility as a city and as a Board of Canvassers. We put a plan together and we moved forward. And they're in there monitoring it. They're in constant contact, they being the Board of Elections. Our Board of Canvassers, I should say.
We have 90 seconds left here, so got to ask about Tidewater. Ted and I we were looking at the monthly report that comes out, construction report, and it just looks like to us, construction is 16% behind. Is that your understanding?
That's where they are. They're projecting right now. Yes.
How confident are you that they will be playing football on the Pawtucket pitch in 2025? Where tickets went on sale already.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, absolutely they're going to be there next year. They're trying to figure out, there was some equipment issues that they're, from a supply chain issue that held back some of it. I'm very confident with the team. They're going to be playing there next year. Now, in fairness, is it March, their first game, April, but they will be playing there. They will have their annual season next year. There's no doubt in my mind. So.
All right. And a pedestrian bridge that went out for RFP, or you've awarded the contract in that?
So we'll be doing that. We've identified all the funding sources. Now it'll be the timeline that comes in, because that's the next important component. And we have the phase 1B, if you'll call it, for what's on the other side of the river, and there's requirements on that. We're having preliminary conversations about the mixed use and the retail and what the financial numbers look like, but that's moving along as well. So,
all right. Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebien, thanks so much for joining us. When we come back, you'll want to listen to this interview. It's a great one that Ted had with Jonathan Martin from Politico on the presidential race. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Hard to believe, but Election Day is now just a month away. So we wanted to get an expert take on where things stand in the race for president. Ted Nesi spoke one-on-one with one of the country's most plugged-in campaign reporters, Jonathan Martin, politics bureau chief and senior political columnist for Politico. Here's their conversation.
Jonathan Martin, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with our audience here in Rhode Island, Massachusetts about the state of play in the presidential race. I know you love every state the same, I know, but I know you love New England.
I do. I'm very fond of New England, especially from May until October, Ted.
Yeah, well, that's the best time to be up here. So I want to get right into it. Before I ask about today's state of the race, you've been a political reporter a long time.
Yeah.
How would you describe the series of unprecedented events we have experienced in American politics since late June?
Hollywood would reject this script as too fanciful. It would not even be a movie because it's too preposterous. But here we are. It just goes to show that life is better than fiction. And we're all living an extraordinary political life this year. So it's been a turbulent summer. Who knows what's still in store? The first day of October brought the threat of a wider war in the Middle East and a dock strike nationally. So it's going to be a fascinating October to see. It's already been a wild first half of the year.
Can you believe that a sitting president, when you reflect on it, actually dropped out of the presidential race?
It's more remarkable the longer you think about what happened. That you had the incumbent president the summer before his reelection effectively forced out by his own party. We've had, incumbents who declined to run for re-election, Ted, but we've not had the kind of British style of parliamentary coup where the other party leaders decided that their standard bearer was, in fact, too weakened to stand for re-election and effectively forced him out.
And you've
that'll
seen
be written about for decades, yeah.
And you've seen Nancy Pelosi's comments. I mean, do you believe she was the prime actor as someone who's covered her a long time? You do.
I do believe that. I know it's the truth because she was relentless, and when it looked like there may not be the sort of groundswell to push Biden out, she kept on going.
Wow. So, as you said, it's now October as we tape this. How would you describe the state of the presidential race as of today?
Biden was on course to lose and lose decisively, and Kamala Harris has had a good 2-month launch and has kind of put Democrats back into a place where they could win. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but it means that they're competitive again in a way that Biden was not going to be by the time he dropped out on July 21st. But look, Harris is building the plane as she's flying it. She effectively becomes the Democratic nominee that week of, July 22nd. That's not a lot of time to build a campaign. So she's done well. She had a good convention, solid first debate. But I think, Ted, she still has work to do. She's got to convince voters who don't know a lot about her that she's going to govern from the political center, that she's going to be a mainstream figure. And I think that if she doesn't have a second debate, she's going to have to find her own opportunities to convey that case to the voters.
Around here, obviously, we pay close attention to who controls Congress because everybody in Congress is a Democrat in the seats in this region. So control was a big issue that we were talking about in July. I mean, how much do you think this was driven by, regardless of the Democrats keep the White House, they had to avoid getting slaughtered in Congress?
That was certainly the motivation of the congressional leaders, especially Pelosi, is they were, of course, dreading the possibility of Trump winning. but they were even more alarmed about what Biden could do on the rest of the ballot and the damage that could have been incurred among, House and Senate Democrats if Biden had gone forward. So I think, at the very least, even if Harris loses, she's put Democrats in a better place where they're now more competitive up and down the ticket. They could lose a couple of Senate seats, but probably not more than that. And the House obviously is on a knife's edge too. So, she has been a good party soldier. She can win. Doesn't mean she's gonna win. But what's for sure is that we're not going to have the kind of top to bottom bloodbath that I think we were on course for if Biden had stayed in the race. I mean, imagine, Ted, if Biden had stayed in the race with a party that had demanded he leave the race. The convention, the debates, the fall campaign would have been so ugly.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember at the time thinking how, they kept saying he could go on until obviously he dropped, and you right. Imagine the questions, the press coverage he would have gotten in his final months.
It would have been unrelenting. Yeah, because all the folks that called for him to drop out would have been asked again in the fall after he did drop out. Well, you said he was too old to run, but now you're for him? I mean, it would have been really difficult, Right,
our own Senators Reid and Whitehouse both apparently confronted that issue in that big Senate meeting. Let's talk about Trump. Everyone says a bit of a more professionalized operation. You can't change Donald Trump. Maybe the folks around him are a little more organized than they were in the past too. I don't know. How do you diagnose this Trump campaign at this point, how they're doing with this admittedly huge shock they got mid-cycle?
Structure of it obviously is more professionalized, and they're more sort of nimble and kind of able to, jump into news cycles. For example, you look at the response to the flooding in the South and how he tried to parlay that. But Ted, he's still Donald Trump. He's still going to say outlandish things. For him to stand up there and say he didn't like paying overtime, and in fact, he didn't pay overtime to his workers, is just political malpractice of the highest order, right? And he does that kind of thing day after day. This is not my phrase, but I borrowed it, which is this election is Trump's to lose, and he's trying to do just that. The stuff he says on a daily basis is just so self-defeating, almost self-sabotaging, but yet it's obviously still a very competitive race. This should be a good Republican year. Look, the incumbent administration, a Democratic administration, not terribly popular, especially on the economy and on immigration. Republicans should have a good cycle, but what is blocking that is the fact that Trump and his personal comportment and manner are so alienating to a huge chunk of the country that it limits the gains that his party should otherwise make.
How much do you worry after what we saw in 2020 about the aftermath? About
a lot.
So you think it's still there's a real risk of what happens after the polls close?
Never going to concede, Ted. It's never going to be an outcome where he says, well, you know what, I gave it the old college try here, and but boy, we just came up a little bit short. Kamala Harris, my prayers are with you. Give me a break. He's never going to do that. So yeah, I think, first of all, we're not going to have a result on election night. It's going to take a while to count the ballots because of how these ballots are now coming in and when they're counted, and the fact that if they're postmarked on election day, they still count. So in a close race, it'll take a few days, and Trump will certainly use that to make the claim that somehow he was cheated. So yeah, I feel like we're on course for some kind of a repeat of 20. I hope to God it's not as violent as January 6th, but I do worry about that because Trump is just simply never going to accept the fact that he lost if he lost.
I have to ask you about our Commerce Secretary and former governor from Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo.
I've heard of her.
I think you met her.
It rings a bell. Yeah.
So, her stock was pretty high with Team Biden. Now there is a new sheriff in town with Kamala Harris. Where do you think her stock is in Harris world compared to where it was with Biden world?
She's been a good soldier campaigning for Kamala Harris. I don't know how close that relationship is, but could she find a slot in a Harris administration? Probably. Would it be a Treasury Secretary? I'm not so sure about that. The other scenario, Ted, is that Kamala Harris loses, and I just think Gina would almost certainly give 2028 a look. I don't know if she'd go through with the campaign, but I have no doubt that she would explore a candidacy in 26 and 27.
One last question for you, and like I said, I appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
You get to cover national politics at a very high level. You get to talk directly to the principles that most of us just see on TV. What do you think is the biggest misconception about national politics that a lot of the rest of us have who are, watching from the sidelines?
To use a pop culture reference, the assumption is that it's like the House of Cards, when actually it's like Veep. Washington and national politics is no different than anybody else's workplace. There's, a handful of competent people, but there's a lot of folks who are barely tying their shoes every day. And the idea people could execute these like nefarious plots and pull off these vast conspiracies just gives them way too much credit. People are people, and it's no different from your own life. And like, what's amazing to me, Ted, is that folks who were so scornful of Washington and the bureaucracy simultaneously roll their eyes at how inefficient it is, but also assign them incredible skill and dexterity when it comes to pulling off these like outlandish plots. It's like both things can't be true, but somehow that's how it works. I think folks have seen too much Hollywood. But again, it's more like Veep than it is House of Cards. Sorry to disappoint you folks. There was no conspiracy with Biden. He simply took a risk with an early debate. Trump took the bait, and Biden, showed up and looked like he was every bit of 82 years old. There was no strategy beyond the Biden folks trying to shake up the campaign, and it blew up in their face. But it wasn't a conspiracy.
A lot of contingency in American history, right? So, Jonathan Martin, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk with us.
Thanks, Ted.
Great conversation. Thanks to Jonathan Martin. When we come back, debate season is once again upon us. We'll have the details next on Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. October in an election year means it's debate season here at 12 News, and 2024 is no different. We have a series of debates in the key races this fall. Things kick off next week with a debate between the two candidates for Woonsocket Mayor, incumbent Christopher Beauchamp and City Council President John Ward. And you can watch that debate on Friday, October 11th at 6:30 p.m. on Fox Providence. Next, in their only currently scheduled debate, Democratic U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse faces off against his Republican challenger, State Rep Patricia Morgan. That debate will air at 7 p.m. on Fox Providence on Friday, October 18th. And finally, a debate between the two candidates for Cranston Mayor, Republican Ken Hopkins, the incumbent, versus Democrat Robert Ferry. You can watch that one on Friday, October 25th at 6:30 p.m. on Fox Providence. And look, if you miss any of them, all of the debates air again on Sunday in our regular Newsmakers time slots, or you can watch them at any time on WPRI.com. We want to thank our first half guest, who's Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebien, and we got the latest update on the situation with iconic toy maker Hasbro. If you missed it, it's on WPRI.com, or you can subscribe to our podcast. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. I want to thank you for watching this week. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.